Alright, so in this video, we will be starting the first series of novellas. The books that I have, they come with like 3 novellas each in order as, they came out. This one has Six's Legacies, Nine's Legacies. Is it C's or Legacy? Oh, my bad. Six's Legacy, Nine's Legacy, and the Fallen Legacies. So you'll get backstories on these. Technically, this is 3 books in one book. So, we'll be able, when we finish this, we'll have read 3 novellas. So that's pretty interesting. I'll be doing this at the same time that I do The Rise of Nine. I think it's kind of cool to give you guys, the backstory while progressing with the stories. And you can listen to this whenever you choose. You can listen to it after the books, you can listen to it in between, you can listen to it at the same time, however you choose. Let me know what you think of these books in the comments below. I'd love to get your feedback. And if you haven't subscribed already, go ahead and subscribe to this channel. Hit that notification bell to get more videos. And hit the thumbs up if you like the video. Alright. So without further ado, reading by Ree, we'll be reading I Am Number 4, The Lost Files. That is what this set of novellas is called. The Legacies. Starting with Six's Legacy by Pittacus Lore. You know we're out there, living among you. You know we're waiting for our day to come. You've seen the power of our legacies. You know this is why they hunt us. You may think you know our stories. You are wrong. We each have our own story. We know the time has come to share them with you. Our legacies are your only hope. That's pretty cool. Okay. So we will start with Six's Legacy. Katarina says there's more than one way to hide. Before we came down here to Mexico, we lived in a suburb of Denver. My name then was Sheila, a name I hate even more than my current name, Kelly. We lived there for 2 years, and I wore barrettes in my hair and pink rubber bracelets on my wrists, like all the other girls at my school. I had sleepovers with some of them, the girls I called my friends. I went to school during the school year, and in the summer I went to a swimmer's camp at the YMCA. I liked my friends and the life we had there okay, but I had already been moved around by my C-Pan Katarina enough to know that it wasn't going to be permanent. I knew it wasn't my real life. My real life took place in our basement, where Katarina and I did combat training. By day, it was ordinary suburban rec room with a big comfy couch and a TV in one corner and a ping pong table in the other. By night, it was a well-stocked combat training gym with hanging bags, floor mats, weapons, and even a makeshift pommel horse. In public, Katarina played the part of my mother, claiming that her husband and my father had been killed in a car accident when I was an infant. Our names, our lives, our stories were all fictions, identities for me and Katarina to hide behind. But those identities allowed us to live out in the open, acting normal, blending in. That was one way of hiding. But we slipped up. To this day, I can remember our conversation as we drove away from Denver, headed to Mexico for no other reason than we'd never been there, both of us trying to figure out how exactly we'd blown our cover. Something I said to my friend Eliza had contradicted something Katarina had said to Eliza's mother. Before Denver, we'd lived in Nova Scotia for a cold, cold winter, but as I remembered it, our story, the lie we'd agreed to tell, was that we'd lived in Boston before Denver. Katarina remembered differently, and claimed Tallahassee as our previous home. Then Eliza told her mother, and that's when people started to get suspicious. It was hardly a calamitous exposure. We had no immediate reason to believe our slip would raise the kind of suspicion that could attract the Mogadorians to our location. But our life had gone sour there, and Katarina figured we'd been there long enough as it was, so we moved yet again. The sun was bright and hard in Puerto Blanco. The air impossibly dry. Katarina and I make no attempt to blend in with the other residents, Mexican farmers and their children. Our only regular contact with the locals is our once-a-week trip into town to buy essentials at a small store. We are the only whites for many miles, and though we both speak good Spanish, there's no confusing us for natives of the place. To our neighbors, we are the gringas, strange white recluses. Sometimes you can sometimes you can hide just as effectively by sticking out, Katarina says. She appears to be right. We have been here almost a year, and we haven't been bothered once. We lead a lonely but ordered life in a sprawling single-level shack tucked between two big patches of farmland. We wake up with the sun, and before eating or showering, Katarina has me run drills in the backyard, running up and down a small hill, doing calisthenics, and practicing Tai Chi. We take advantage of the two relatively cool hours of morning. Morning drills are followed by a light breakfast, then 3 hours of studies, languages, world history, and whatever other subjects Katarina can dig up from the internet. She says her teaching method and subject matter are eclectic. I don't know what the word means, but I'm just grateful for the variety. Katarina is a quiet, thoughtful woman, and though she's the closest thing I have to a mother, she's very different from me. Studies are probably the highlight of her day. I prefer drills. After studies, it's back out into the blazing sun, where the heat makes me dizzy enough that I can almost hallucinate my imagined enemies. I do battle with straw men, shooting them with arrows, stabbing them with knives, or simply pummeling them with my bare fists. But half blind from the sun, I see them as Mogadorians, and I relish the chance to tear them to pieces. Katarina says even though I'm only 13 years old, I'm so agile and so strong, I could easily take down even a well-trained adult. One of the nice things about living in Puerto Blanco is that I don't have to hide my skills. Back in Denver, whether swimming at the Y or just playing on the street, I always had to hold back to keep myself from revealing the superior speed and strength that Katarina's training regimen has resulted in. We keep to ourselves out here, away from the eyes of others, so I don't have to hide. Today is Sunday, so our afternoon drills are short, only an hour. I am shadowboxing with Katarina in the backyard, and I can feel her eagerness to quit. Her moves are half-hearted, she's squinting against the sun, and she looks tired. I love training and could go all day, but out of deference to her, I suggest we call it a day. Oh, I suppose we could finish early, she says. I grin privately, allowing her to think I'm the tired one. We go inside, and Katarina pours us 2 tall glasses of agua fresca, our customary Sunday treat. The fan is blowing full force in our humble shack's living room. Katarina boots up her various computers while I kick off my dirty, sweat-filled fighting boots and collapse to the floor. I stretch my arms to keep them from knotting up, then swing them to the bookshelf in the corner and pull out a tall stack of board games we keep there. Risk, Stratego, Othello. Katarina has tried to interest me in games like Life and Monopoly, saying it wouldn't hurt to be well-rounded. But those games never held my interest. Katarina got the hint, and now we only play combat and strategy games. Risk is my favorite, and since we finished early today, I think Katarina will agree to playing it, even though it's a longer game than the others. Risk? Katarina is at her desk chair, pivoting from one screen to the next. Risk of what? She asks absently. I laugh, then shake the box near her head. She doesn't look up from the screens, but the sound of all those pieces rattling around inside the box is enough for her to get it. Oh, she says. Sure. I set up the board. Without asking, I divvy up the armies into hers and mine, and begin placing them all across the game's map. We've played this game so much I don't need to ask her which countries she'd like to claim, or which territories she'd like to fortify. She always chooses the U.S. and Asia. I happily place her pieces on those territories, knowing that from my more easily defended territories I will quickly grow armies strong enough to crush hers. I'm so absorbed in setting up the game I don't even notice Katarina's silence, her absorption. It is only when I crack my neck loudly and she neglects to scold me for it. Please don't, she usually says, squeamish about the sound it makes, that I look up and see her staring open-mouthed at one of her monitors. Kat? I ask. She's silent. I get up from the floor, stepping across the game board to join her at her desk. It's only then that I see what has so completely captured her attention. A breaking news item about some kind of explosion on a bus in England. I groan. Katarina is always checking the internet and the news for mysterious deaths. Deaths that could be the work of the Mogadorians. Deaths that could mean the second member of the Guard has been defeated. She's been doing it since we came to Earth, and I've grown frustrated with the doom and gloom of it. Besides, it's not like it did us any good the first time. I was 9 years old, living in Nova Scotia with Katarina. Our training room there was in the attic. Katarina had retired from training for the day, but I still had energy to burn, and I was doing moors and spindles on the pommel horse alone when I suddenly felt a blast of scorching pain on my ankle. I lost my balance and came crashing down to the mat, clutching my ankle and screaming in pain. My first scar. It meant that the Mogadorians had killed number 1, the first of the Guard. And for all of Katarina's web scouring, it had caught us both completely unaware. We waited on pins and needles for weeks after, expecting a second death and a second scar to follow in short order. But it didn't come. I think Katarina is still coiled, anxious, ready to spring, but 3 years have passed, almost a quarter of my whole life, and it's just not something I think about much. I step between her and the monitor. It's Sunday. Game time. Please, Kelly. She says my most recent alias with a certain stiffness. I know I will always be 6 to her, in my heart, too. These aliases I use are just shells. They're not who I really am. I'm sure back on Lorien I had a name, a real name, not just a number. But that's so far back, and I've had so many names since then, that I can't remember what it was. 6 is my true name. 6 is who I am. Katarina bats me aside, eager to read more details. We've lost so many game days to news alerts like this, and they never turn out to be anything. They're just ordinary tragedies. Earth, I've come to discover, has no shortage of tragedies. Nope, it's just a bus crash. We're playing a game. I pull at her arms, eager for her to relax. She looks so tired and worried, I know she could use the break. She holds firm. It's a bus explosion. And apparently, she says, pulling away to read from the screen, the conflict is ongoing. The conflict always is, I say, rolling my eyes. Come on. She shakes her head, giving one of her frazzled laughs. Okay, she says, fine. Katarina pulls herself away from the monitor, sitting on the floor by the game. It takes all my strength not to lick my chops at her upcoming defeat. I always win at risk. I get down beside her on my knees. You're right, Kelly, she says, allowing herself to grin. I needn't panic over every little thing. One of the monitors in Katarina's desk lets out a sudden ding, one of her alerts. Her computers are programmed to scan for unusual news reports, blog posts, even notable shifts in global weather, all sifting for possible news of the Guard. Oh, come on, I say. But Katarina is already off the floor and back at the desk, scrolling and clicking from link to link once again. Fine, I say, annoyed, but I'm showing no mercy when the game begins. Suddenly, Katarina is silent, stopped cold by something she's found. I get up off the floor and step over the board, making my way to the monitor. I look at the screen. It is not, as I'd imagined, a news report from England. It is a simple, anonymous blog post, just a few haunting, tantalizing words. 9, now 8. Are the rest of you out there? Chapter 2. There's a cry in the wilderness from a member of the Guard, some girl or boy, the same age as me, looking for us. In an instant, I've seized the keyboard from Katarina and I hammer out a response in the comment section. We are here. Katarina bats my hand away before I can hit enter. 6! I pull back, ashamed of my imprudence, my haste. We have to be careful. The Mogadorians are on the hunt. They've killed 1. For all we know, they have a path to 3. But they're alone, I say. The words come out before I have a chance to think what I'm saying. I don't know how I know this. It's just a hunch I have. If this member of the Guard has been desperate enough to reach out on the internet looking for others, his or her CPAN must have been killed. I imagine my fellow Guard's panic, her fear. I can't imagine what it would be like to lose my Katarina, to be alone, to consider all I deal with. Without Katarina, it's unimaginable. What if it's 2? What if she's in England, and the Mogs are after her, and she's reaching out for help? A second ago I was scoffing at Katarina's absorption in the news, but this is different. This is a link to someone like me. Now I'm desperate to help them, to answer their call. Maybe it's time. I say, balling my fist. Time? Katarina is scared, wearing a baffled expression. Time to fight! Katarina's head falls into her hands and she laughs into her palms. In moments of high stress, Katarina sometimes reacts this way. She laughs when she should be stern, gets serious when she should laugh. Katarina looks up and I realize she's not laughing at me. She's just nervous and confused. Your legacies haven't developed, she cries. How could we possibly start the war now? She gets up from her desk, shaking her head. No, we are not ready to fight. Until your powers are manifest, we will not start this battle. Until the guard is ready, we must hide. Then we have to send her a message. Her? You don't know it's a she. For all we know, it's no one. Just some random person using language that accidentally tripped my alert. I know it's one of us, I say, fixing Katarina with my eyes. And you do too. Katarina nods, admitting defeat. Just one message. To let them know they're not alone. To give her hope. Her again. Katarina laughs, almost sadly. I think it's a girl because I imagine whoever wrote the message to me to be like me. A more scared and more alone version of me. One who's been deprived of her CPAN. Okay, she says. I step between her and the monitor, my fingers hovering over the keys. I decide the message I've already typed, we are here, will suffice. I hit enter. Katarina shakes her head, ashamed to have indulged me so recklessly. Within moments, she is at the computer, scrubbing any trace of our location from the transmitter. Feel better? She asks, turning off the monitor. I do, a little. To think I've given a bit of solace and comfort to one of the guard makes me feel good. Connected to the larger struggle. Before I can respond, I'm electrified by a pain, the likes of which I've only known once before. A lava-hot lancet digging through the flesh of my right ankle. My leg shoots out from beneath me and I scream, attempting to distance myself from the pain by holding my ankle as far from the rest of me as I can. Then I see it. The flesh on my ankle sizzling, popping with smoke. A new scar, my second, snakes its way across my skin. Katarina! I scream, punching the floor with my fist, desperate with pain. Katarina is frozen in horror, unable to help. The second, she says. Number 2 is dead. Chapter 3. Katarina rushes to the tap, fills a pitcher, and dumps it across my leg. I'm nearly catatonic from the pain, biting my lips so hard it bleeds. I watch the water sizzle as it hits my burned flesh. Then it floods the game board, washing the army pieces off onto the floor. You win, I say, making a feeble joke. Katarina doesn't acknowledge my attempt at wit, my protector. She's gone into full-on CPAN mode, pulling first aid supplies out from every corner of our shack. Before I know it, she's applied a cooling salve to my scar and wrapped and taped it with gauze. 6, she says, her eyes moist with fear and pity. I'm taken aback. She only uses my real name in moments of extreme crisis. But then I realize that's what this is. Years had passed since one's death, without incident. It had gotten easy to imagine it was a fluke. If we were feeling really hopeful, we could imagine one had died in an accident, that the Mogadorians hadn't caught our scent. That time is over. We know for sure now. The Mogadorians have found the second member of the guard and killed him or her. Two's message to us, to the world, was the last thing he or she would ever do. Their violent death was now written across my skin. We know 2 deaths is no fluke. The countdown has truly begun. I almost faint, but pull myself to consciousness by biting my lip even harder. 6, Katarina says, wiping the blood from my mouth with a cloth. Relax. I shake my head. No, I can never relax. Not ever. Katarina's straining to keep her composure. She doesn't want to frighten me, but she also wants to do the right thing, to honor her responsibilities as a CPAN. I can tell she's torn between every possible reaction. From outright panic to philosophical cool, whatever's the best for me and for the fate of the guard. She cradles my head, wipes the sweat from my brow. The water and the salve have taken the sharpest edge off the pain, but it still hurts as bad as the first time, maybe worse. But I won't comment on it. I can see that my pain and this evidence of Two's passing is tormenting Katarina enough. We'll be okay, says Katarina. There are still many others. I know she's speaking carelessly. She doesn't mean to put the lives of the guard before me, 3, 4, and 5, ahead of my own. She's just grasping for consolation. consolation, but I won't let it pass. Yeah, it's so great others have to die before me. That's not what I meant. I can see my words have upset her. I sigh, putting my head against her shoulder. Sometimes, in my heart of hearts, I use a different name for Katarina. Sometimes, to me, she's not Katarina, or Vicky, or Celeste, or any of her other aliases. Sometimes, in my mind, I call her Mom. Chapter 4. We're on the road an hour later. Katarina white-knuckles the steering wheel of our truck through country roads, cursing her choice of hideaway. These roads are too rough and dusty to go faster than 40 miles per hour, and what we both want is the speed of a highway, anything to put as much distance as possible between us and our now abandoned shack. Katarina did what she could to scrub our tracks, but if what we imagine is true, the Mogadorians killing 2 seconds after we saw her fatal blog post, then they moved fast, and they could be racing towards our abandoned home right now. As I watched the fields and the hills pass through the passenger window, I realized that they could already be at the shack. In fact, they could already be following us on the road. Feeling like a coward as I do it, I crane my neck and look through the rear window. Through the dust trail, our truck kicks up in our wake. No cars trail us, not yet, at least. We packed light. The truck was already loaded with a first aid kit, a lightweight camping set, bottled water, flashlights, and blankets. Once I was ready to walk again, all I had to do was pick out a few items of clothing for the road and retrieve my chest from the lockbox under the shack. The panic of flight gave me little time to feel the searing pain of my second scar, but it returns to me now, lacerating and insistent. "We shouldn't have responded," says Katarina. "I don't know what we were thinking." I look at Katarina for signs of judgment on her face. After all, I'm the one who insisted we write back, and I'm relieved to find none. All I see is her fear, and her determination to get us as far away as possible. I realize that in the confusion and haste to flee, I forgot to notice if we turned north or south at the crossing at the edge of Puerto Blanco. "U.S.?" I ask. Katarina nods, pulling our most recent passports from the inside pocket of her army jacket, tossing mine into my lap. I flip it open and peer at my new name. Marin Elizabeth, I say aloud. Katarina puts a lot of time into her forgeries, though I usually complain about the names she chooses for me. When I was 8 and we were moving to Nova Scotia, I begged and begged to be named Starla. Katarina vetoed this suggestion. She thought it was too attention-getting, too exotic. I almost laugh to think about it now. A Katarina in Mexico is about as exotic as you can get, and of course she's keeping it. Katarina has grown attached to her own name. Sometimes I suspect that CPANs aren't so different from parents after all. Marin Elizabeth. It's no Starla, but I like how it sounds. I reach down and cradle my calf, just above the throbbing scars on my ankle. By squeezing my calf, I can muffle the pain of my sizzled flesh. But as the pain fades, the fear returns. The fear of our present situation, the horror of 2's death. I decide to let go of my calf, and I let my leg burn. Katarina refuses to stop the car for anything but gas and pee breaks. It's a long trip, but we have ways to pass the time. Mostly we play Shadow, a game that Katarina made up during our previous travels, out of our desire to keep training even when we couldn't do physical drills. A Mogadorian scout races at you from 2 o'clock, wielding a 20-inch blade in his left arm. He swings. I crouch, I say. Dodge left. He swings around, the blade above your head. From the ground, a kick to the groin. A leg sweep, from his right side to his left. On his back, but he grabs your arm. I let him. I use the force of his grip to swing my legs free, up, and then down to his face. Step on his face. Pull my hand free. It's a strange game. It forces me to separate the physical from reality, to fight with my brain and not my body. I used to complain about games of Shadow, saying it was all made up, that it wasn't real. Fighting was fists and feet and heads. It wasn't brains, it wasn't words. But the more Shadow we played, the better I got at drills, especially hand-to-hand drills with Katarina. I couldn't deny that the game made good practice. It made me a better fighter. I have come to love it. I run, I say. Too late, she says. I almost complain, knowing what's coming. You forgot about the sword, she says. He's already swung it up and nicked your flank. No, he didn't, I say. I froze his sword and shattered it like glass. Oh, you did now. Katarina is tired, eyes bloodshot from 10 straight hours of driving, but I can see I'm amusing her. I must have missed that part. Yeah, I say, starting to grin myself. And how'd you pull off that feat? My legacy. It just kicked in. Turns out I can freeze stuff. This is make-believe. I have yet to develop my legacies, and I have no idea what they'll be when they arrive. That's a good one, says Katarina. Alright, let's see how long chapter 5 is. Oh, it's really short. We're kind of booking through this in, we're only at 25 minutes, so I'm going to keep going. Chapter 5. We crossed the U.S. border hours back, without a hitch. I have never understood how Katarina manages to make such incredible forgeries. Katarina is pulling us into a dusty pit stop off the highway. There's a tiny single-story motel, an old-fashioned and decrepit diner, and a gas station, newer and brighter than the other two buildings. It is barely dusk when we step out of the truck. The faintest pink of sunrise creeps over the horizon, just enough to add a strange hue to our flesh as we stumble out onto the gravel. Katarina curses, getting back into the car. Forgot to get gas, she says. Wait here. I do as I'm told, watching her pull the truck from the motel parking lot towards one of the pumps. We have agreed to rest up at the motel for a day or two, to recover from our grueling 15-hour drive and the shock of recent events. But even though we'll be here for some time, the tank must be filled. That's Katarina's policy. Never leave an empty tank, she says. I think she says it as much to remind herself as to educate me. It's a good policy. You never know when you'll have to leave in a hurry. I watch Katarina pull up to the pump and start filling the car. I examine my surroundings. Through the front window of the diner across the lot, I can see a few grizzled-looking truckers eating. Through the scent of exhaust and the faint odor of gas fumes from the pumps, I can smell breakfast food in the air. Or maybe I'm just imagining it. I'm incredibly hungry. My mouth waters at the thought of breakfast. I turn my back on the diner, trying not to think about food, and look at the town on the other side of the fence from the pit stop. Houses only a step up from clapboard shacks, a ragged, desolate place. Hello, miss. Startled, I whiz around to see a tall, gray-haired cowboy strutting past. It takes me a second to realize that he's not starting a conversation, merely being polite as he passes. He gives a little nod of his 10-gallon hat and proceeds past me to the diner. My heart rate is up. I'd forgotten this aspect of the road. When we're settled in a place, even a remote one like Puerto Blanco, we get to know the local faces. We know more or less who to trust. I've never seen a Mogadorian in my life, but Katarina says that most of the Mogadorians look like anyone else. After what happened to 1 and 2, I feel a deep unease all around me, a new alertness. A roadside rest stop is especially troublesome in that everyone is a stranger to everyone, so no one raises any eyebrows, not really. For us, that means anyone could be a threat. Katarina has parked the car and approaches me with a wary grin. Eat or sleep, she asks. Before I can answer, she's raised her hand hopefully. My vote for sleep. My vote is to eat. Katarina deflates at this. You know eat beats sleep, I say. Always does. It is one of our rules of the road, and Katarina quickly accepts the verdict. Okay, Mary and Elizabeth, she says, lead the way. Let's see how long chapter 6 is. The chapters are pretty short, so... Alright. I think I'll read chapter 6 and call it a video. The diner is humid with grease. It is barely 6 a.m., but almost all the booths are full, mostly with truckers. While I wait for our food, I watch these men shovel hearty, well-syruped forkfuls of breakfast meat, sausage, bacon, scrapple into their mouths. I don't know what scrapple is, but okay. When my food finally comes, I find myself more than holding my own. 3 pancakes, 4 strips of bacon, a side of hash, 1 tall OJ. I finish with a rude belch that Katarina is too tired to chastise me for. Do you think, I ask. Katarina laughs, anticipating my question. How is that possible? I shrug. She nods and calls the waitress over. With a guilty grin, I order another stack of pancakes. Well, says the waitress, with a dry smoker's cackle, your little girl sure can put it down. The waitress is an older woman, with a face so lined and haggard you could mistake it for a man's. Yes, ma'am, I say. The waitress leaves. Your appetite will never cease to amaze me, Katarina says. But she knows the reason for it. I train constantly, and though I'm only 13 years old, I already have the tightly muscled body of a gymnast. I need a lot of fuel, and am not ashamed of my appetite. Another customer enters the crowded diner. I notice the other men give him a suspicious glance as he makes his way to a booth in the rear. They looked at me and Katarina with a similar suspicion when we first entered. I took this place for a way station filled with strangers, but apparently some strangers are worthy of suspicion and others aren't. Katarina and I are doing our best, dressed in generic American mall clothes, t-shirts and khaki shorts. I can see why we stand out. Apparently, they have a different definition of generic here in the far reaches of West Texas. This other stranger is harder to figure, though. He's dressed the part, more or less, wearing one of those Texas ties with the dangly strands of black leather, and like the rest of the men here, he's wearing boots. But his clothes seem somehow out of date, and there's something creepy about his thin black mustache. It looks straight at first glance, but the more I consider it, something about it just seems crooked. It's impolite to stare, Katarina, chiding me again. I wasn't staring, I lie. I was looking with interest. Katarina laughs. She's laughed more in the past 24 hours than she has in months. This new Katarina is going to take some getting used to. Not that I mind. I stretch out luxuriantly on the hotel bed while Katarina showers in the bathroom. The sheets are cheap, polyester or rayon, but I'm so tired from the road they may as well be silk. When Katarina first pulled the sheets down, we found a live earwig under the pillow, which grossed her out but didn't bother me. Kill it, she begged, covering her eyes. I refused. It's just an insect. Kill it, she begged. Instead, I swept it off the bed and hopped into the cool sheets. Nope, I said stubbornly. Fine, she said, and went to shower. She turned the faucets on, but stepped out of the bathroom again a moment later. I worry, she started. About what? I asked. I worry that I haven't trained you well. I rolled my eyes. 'Cause I won't kill a bug? Yes, no, I mean, it's what got me thinking. You need to learn to kill without hesitation. I haven't even taught you to hunt rodents, let alone Mogadorians. You've never killed anything. Katarina paused, the water still running behind her, thinking. I could tell she was tired, lost in thought. She gets like that sometimes, if we've been training too gruelingly. Kat, I said, go shower. She looked up, her reverie broken. She chuckled and closed the door behind her. Waiting for her to finish, I turned on the TV from the bed. The previous tenant had left it on CNN, and I'm greeted with the sight of helicopter footage of the event in England. I watch only long enough to learn that both the press and English authorities are confused as to what exactly happened yesterday. I'm too tired to think about this. I'll get the details later. I shut off the TV and lay back on the bed, eager for sleep to take me. Katarina steps out of the bathroom moments later, wearing a robe and brushing out her hair. I watch her through half-closed eyes. There's a knock on the door. Katarina drops her brush on the beret? Something. Who is it? She asks. Manager, miss. I brought you some fresh towels. I'm so annoyed by the interruption. I want to sleep, and it's pretty obvious we don't need fresh towels since we only just got to the room, that I propel myself right off the bed, barely thinking. We don't need any, I say, already swinging the door open. I just have time to hear Katarina say, don't! Before I see him, standing before me, the crooked mustache man. The scream catches in my throat as he enters the room and shuts the door behind him. All right, that was the end of chapter 6 in 6's legacy. 6. Anyway, okay, I hope you're enjoying it so far. We'll be getting into the what we already know has happened, so we'll see how it goes through in their mindset with Katarina actually really in the picture. Okay, well, go ahead and make sure that you like the video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, and leave me a comment below. Alright, that's all for now. Reading by Ree. Until next time, bye!